I'm Bill Ed Huff, and this is a new edition of Campbell Music Club. You're looking at the tune version of myself because tunes are what we're all about. Sometimes we look at sacred music. Sometimes we look at secular music. But we always try to look at what makes music great. Before we get started, I'd like to engage in some trivia. I wonder who can figure out which hymn is hidden within the new Campbell Music Club theme song. Be sure to leave your guesses in the comments to the link that led you here. In our last edition, we discussed a brief history of hymns. Today, we will discuss
the Granddaddies and Grandmommas of hip. And it may just be a little bit controversial. Yes, controversial, but also accurate. Want to know what in the world I'm talking about? I'm talking about the misconception in contemporary worship music. See, it isn't that it doesn't exist. It's that it's existed about as long as worship has. Church music used to be freely composed in its own present day. Monks wrote chants, for instance. And they sang them to worship the Lord shortly thereafter in chapel time. But as the centuries in worship music progressed, do you know who the real granddaddy of hip was? Johann Sebastian Bach. That's right, Bach, who frequently wrote original church music each week to be used on Sundays. Organ pieces, preludes, choral pieces. Der Kapellmeister was in the house, bringing the fresh, hip, contemporary worship sounds of the Baroque era around the turn of the 18th century. So, what changed? How did we get from expecting freshly written compositions to be presented as an offering unto God to some folks today being convinced that the only proper worship music is ancient or traditional worship music?
Before you get upset with me, you need to know that I love traditional hymns. And I love classical music. I've had several years of classical training, and I wouldn't have put myself through that if I didn't love it. And I love a great deal of modern music too. In fact, I'm pretty picky about the 21st century music that I listen to. But it's time to get past the antiquated notion that the only good worship music is, well, antiquated. Instead, perhaps it's time to judge each individual piece of sacred music, old or new, on its own merits. It's not the age of the music that makes it sacred. It's the intent of the content.
Were there any grandmommas of hip, you say? Well, there was this lady who was not a member of the cast of The Matrix, but she was a 19th century household name, a real grandmama of hip, who will be featured in the next edition of Campbell Music Club. If you know who this is without looking her up on the web, post it in the comments of this entry of the Campbell Music Club on Campbell TV. We'll see you all soon, and remember, keep your ears open for the good stuff.
Please consider supporting our ministries with a recurring gift at campbellumc.org. And remember, God loves you, Christ loves you, and Campbell does too.